Well, good morning, church. I am super excited to be hanging out with you today. It is a beautiful Sunday. I know that probably where you are, the weather might be slightly different than where we are, but either way, it is a beautiful Sunday. Why is it a beautiful Sunday? Because history repeats itself. Now, you might be wondering, what in the world would I, why did I say that? Well, it's a common phrase. Have we not heard the phrase, history repeats itself, right? And normally it comes with a negative connotation, which means like we will say, hey, if we don't learn from our past mistakes, then we are, eventually going to repeat them. And we may not actually learn from them last time, which means that we probably won't learn from them this time. Who knows? We don't know the future, right? But that's commonly when we use the phrase history repeats itself, meaning please learn from the past. Please learn from things that have happened before, mistakes that have been made before, or failures, or whatever language you want to use, so that we don't have to relive a lesson that was probably really hard to go through and to understand. How can we prevent that, right? Of course, so when it comes to human history, has history repeated itself? Yes, it has. And well, you've noticed that, we as human beings don't necessarily learn things so well, or I guess a better thing to say is we don't remember things so well. Because if we remembered what we did in the past, or if we remember generations in the past and what they went through, maybe we wouldn't do the same mistake. Now, if you will allow me for just a second, what if we could take that same phrase, history repeats itself, and instead of thinking of something negative, meaning look at your past failures, your past mistakes, and I don't mean your specifically, I'm saying our, as human beings, if we look at our past, is it the negative that's going to repeat itself? What if we were to say, actually, history will always repeat itself, but that doesn't always necessarily mean the negative. What if history repeats itself in a positive way too? Meaning, what if, during certain times in life, you have seen something beautiful, something amazing, something positive, something loving, something, that brings life, and you thought, that's so cool because they did this way back in the day, and now we're watching it resurge or rehappen, and it's a positive. So does history repeat itself? Yes. But here's my question to you, is would you be able to recognize something good, something positive, as you begin to experience it in your life, wondering, has this ever happened before? Like something wondrous and amazing just like this, has it happened before? And I want to take you to one specific moment in our future history that as we're reading it, because yes, we are going through the book of Revelation, but as we're reading the future, and I say future history because history would be in the past, but we're talking about the future, but we're also talking about the past at the same time. So here we are talking about the eschaton, or the last things, the last days. We're looking at Revelation, and more specifically, you guys will eventually be looking at Revelation chapter 6. Let me get there. Chapter 15. Before we get there, though, what we see in chapter 15 is so filled with so much language that is specifically found in another book of the Bible. And in order for us to really bring justice to chapter 15 of Revelation, we have to, in essence, go back into time to look at history and go, wait a second, is history repeating itself? It is. And what's beautiful is, I'll give you this for free. How about that? Okay. When it comes to the history of God, one, God always repeats himself. Okay. And I don't mean as in he's not a creative God. That's the thing. Every single time God repeats himself in history, aka history repeating itself, right? Remember, history is spelled his story. So this is the story of God. We play a role, sure, but this isn't our history because this isn't our planet. This isn't our world. We haven't created this. We are part of the creation, which means all of this is his story, right? God did something back in the day, and as he repeats himself again, it'll never be God did this, and I experienced something about God. By the way, whenever you experience something about God, you will always experience something about yourself because God has created you. So if you experience something about God, it'll always bring light to something about you. So here's God, right? He does an action. He makes a choice in history. And we experience that through the people in the past, and we go, wow, we experienced something about God that was incredible in that moment. When all of a sudden it feels like the story is repeating itself, different characters, but almost an identical event, we look at this and we don't just go, oh yeah, God did it here, so he's doing it here. I already learned this lesson, so I don't really have to pay attention to this event. No, what's beautiful about God and his creativity is that he will do something here, repeat it over here for the sake of humanity, because we forget things. And it'll be something beautiful and positive. So he repeats himself. But this time, he revealed something more about himself. So even though these two events are identical, are paralleling each other, they are the exact same kind of storyline, if you will, but different characters in the second time. Our experience of God has now been greater than the last one, because what God does every time he repeats himself is that he is adding a new revelation of who he is to humanity. But it's not something negative that's being repeated, although there is a lot of things that are negative, meaning God warning Israel, warning Israel, warning Israel, and eventually when it comes to the church, he's warning the church, warning the church, warning the church, right? As we see in Revelation chapters 2 and 3 of the letters that he ends up giving to the churches. He's warning, right? Those are negatives, but here we have positives. We are here to learn and experience something about God because he is paralleling these stories and going, now you know, yes, you've experienced me, but now you're going to experience me in a brand new way that is not going to ignore the past, but rather the past is the solidified base that helps us understand the now construction that is happening not only here, but now more. What do I mean by that? I'm going to summarize what happens, but in Exodus, we are told a story, a very beautiful story. To summarize it in the simplest way possible, once upon a time, okay? Like any good story, it starts off that way. Once upon a time, you had the people of Israel, and they were going through a famine. As a result of the famine, God took care of them, okay? The sons of Israel, one of them being the youngest one, who was unfortunately really mistreated and sold into slavery by his older brothers. Terrible family dynamic, by the way. Don't repeat this. But we have the youngest son. He gets sent to Egypt. As a result of being sent to Egypt as a slave, he actually, through God's help, ends up interpreting dreams, helping the Pharaoh. All of this, eventually the Pharaoh gives super favor to this wonderful man, otherwise known as Joseph. And he, elevates him to the second most powerful person in the kingdom of Egypt. What ends up happening is that there's a famine in the area of Israel. All of the brothers, Joseph's brothers, who compose Israel, right? The 12 tribes of Israel, they're up there suffering along with their dad, aka Israel. They decide, hey, we got to go somewhere. We got to get food somewhere. They end up going to Egypt. They don't know it's their brother. Their brother kind of messes with them a little bit. Why not? Have a little fun while you're helping your family. And they end up getting supplies, but then they're accused of stealing. So immediately they find themselves under the armed guard of Egypt. They think they're going to lose their lives. And then Joseph reveals himself and says, hey, it's me. Look what you intended for evil. That's the thing you want to remember. What you intended for evil, God has made for good. Because I am in Egypt and I am the second most powerful person here. And Egypt doesn't have a famine. Egypt has all the resources they need. As a result, his brothers are brought over along with his dad, and they survive, they grow too big. Well, this Pharaoh dies. Another Pharaoh rises in his place. And this Pharaoh doesn't have the relationship that he had with the previous Pharaoh had with Joseph. So he starts to get a little bitter and a little angry because this group of people that were originally just there as visitors have now overgrown the Egyptian kingdom, right? So it's like, we got to do something about them, and I don't know who they are, and I don't really like them. So they turn them into slaves. And as a result, Israel, the nation of Israel, even though growing tremendously, is now found itself in slavery, in a very aggressive, mean, terrible slavery. This is where we find out that the Egyptian Pharaoh, who is very much kind of a psychopath, ends up deciding to kill all the young boy babies to try to control the population growth of the people of Israel because they are slaves. As a result of that, we have a little baby who finds himself in a basket, who is put into a river, flows down the river, and then is found by one of the Egyptian royals. She ends up taking the baby in as her own, raises the child as her own, and you guessed it, this is Moses. Moses, now being a part of the Egyptian court, finds himself in a sticky situation where he realizes, I'm not Egyptian, but I am part of the Israelites. but they're slaves. He finds a Egyptian taskmaster that is abusing an Israelite. Moses takes matters into his own hands and kills the slave driver. So as a result, he has to run and flee. He runs and he flees. In the desert, God shows up to him in a burning bush and explains to him, you are going to go back to Egypt to set my people free because I've heard their cry and I want to deliver them. Does God deliver them? Yes. To fast forward, there are plagues, several plagues that happen, trying to convince Pharaoh, just let the Israelites go. Pharaoh's heart becomes hardened, doesn't want to listen to God, doesn't want to listen to Moses or Aaron, his spokesperson. And as a result, eventually God just goes, okay, I'm done. I'm going to deal with Pharaoh directly. So I'm going to kill all of the young boys in Egypt, which is exactly what that previous Pharaoh had done. And then he tells the Israelites, now go and I will split the Red Sea so that you guys can walk on dry land. And what ends up happening is they walk on dry land. It is a miracle in and of itself that this deep sea is literally split in two, as if there's two dams holding the water. The Israelites go onto flat, like ground. It's not walking on water. It's not their imagination. Literally, this ocean is split in two. They walk across. When they get on the other side, here comes the Egyptian army behind them, because no, this Pharaoh is hell-bent on he's going to get them. So he goes in, and as soon as him and his army enter the Red Sea, the Israelites who are already on the other side watch as the sea collapses, God releasing the waters, and his enemy is now been drowned and defeated. What ends up happening in Exodus 15 is something beautiful. Just like you and I, if you were to find yourself in a almost death situation, right? And you're wondering, how can I need someone to help me, to rescue me, to deliver me. Yes, all of a sudden that deliverance happens. And what do? You yell, you scream, you get excited. Oh my gosh, I'm alive. And I was rescued. This is what happens with the Israelites, is that they burst into song, but Moses is the one guiding the song. And he begins to sing, and as he's singing this beautiful song on the other side of the Red Sea, looking at the enemy dying and drowning, he realizes this is a time of celebration. Why? Because we didn't do anything. It was all God. So they start to sing this song. Moses gets super excited and sings this song, and I want to read a section of that song to you because of the significance that it has. So this is Exodus 15. This is the song of Moses after they have just walked across the sea, and now they've been delivered, okay? He says this, verse 11 of chapter 15 of Exodus, Lord, who is like you among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, revered with praises, performing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, and the earth swallowed them with your faithful love. You will lead the people you have redeemed. You will guide them to your holy dwelling with your strength. Throughout the entire song, he declares the wonders of God. But here he is just reflecting, Moses looking at the fact that God is glorious in power. He is just. He has defeated his enemy. And now, what is he celebrating? It is your faithful love, God. You are going to lead your people into your dwelling place. I want you now to turn to Revelation chapter 15. And I want you to read slowly with me what we're reading. Then I saw another great awe-inspiring sign in heaven. If you remember, John has seen these signs and the significance and what they mean. So now he sees another one. 7 angels with 7 last plagues. You remember the story I told you about Moses that I summarized? What were there were plagues, right? Again, this entire chapter, it's hilarious that it's Exodus 15 and Revelation 15 that are so closely tied together. It's no coincidence, folks. Same language is being used here. For with them, God's wrath will be completed. Why does it say that God's wrath will be completed? Because it's the number 7. There are 7 bowls. The number 7, numerology tells us, in other words, a study of numbers within the Bible, it's a completed number. It's a Jewish way of measuring that it is something holy, complete, the number 7. So we have the 7 bowls of God's wrath. His wrath is now complete. I also saw something, verse 2, like a sea of glass mixed with fire, with those who had won the victory over the beast, its image, and the number of its name, were standing on the sea of glass with harps from God. Who are these people? Well, it's not just 144,000. No, this is the church. Okay, this is the Gentile. This is everyone who has conquered the beast, his name, his marking, everything. But if you notice, are they in heaven now? Yes. What is the sea of glass? If you guys remember, in Revelation chapter 1 and chapter 2, we are told a description of God. And what is before God's throne is a sea of glass. But it's only the sea of glass. All of a sudden, we see the sea of glass that is now mixed with fire. Why is that image important? Because this is showing that now there is an element of judgment coming. That sea of glass is also where all of these people gather. And what's beautiful is they're all given harps, because they are about to sing a song. Every single believer, every single person of Israel that has accepted Christ as the Messiah, everyone throughout all of time and space is now there, and they're being handed by God a harp, because everyone is going to learn this song together. We keep reading in verse 3. They sang the song of God's servant Moses and the song of the Lamb. Folks, this is where it's all tying together. And why does it matter that they're singing the song of Moses? Because this is the song of God's deliverance. History is repeating itself, but it's not a negative, it's a positive. But there is a negative connotation to it as well, and I'll explain what I mean by that. In the story of Exodus, we are told that here the people of Israel are dealing with the oppression of a power that is trying to control them and kill them and destroy them. And they cry out to God saying, deliver us. And God delivers. He delivers his people. This is the beauty of it. This life-changing event for Israel and for all of human history. This is telling us God redeems, God renews, God restores, and God will bring those who are in slavery out of slavery and finally into freedom. This story in Exodus repeats itself over and over and over and over again in human history. But see, why this time it's significant is because of how it's not going to be repeated again. Keep reading, I'll explain what I mean. This is the song that they sang, not the song of Moses. Mind you, the song of Moses is mentioned, but it says it's also the song of the Lamb, meaning we are going to sing the praises of God in the law, and now we're going to sing the praises of God in his redemptive story, which is the Lamb. We have Moses, the law, and the Lamb of God combined together to make one song. This is now the portion of the Lamb song, which, if you listen carefully, what I read to you in Exodus, which you can go back and read if you want, then you hear this language. Great and awesome, inspiring are your works, Lord God the Almighty. Just and true are your ways. King of the nations, or King of the universe. Lord, who will not fear and glorify your name? For you alone are holy. All the nations will come and worship before you, because your righteous acts have been revealed. It's literally, here's one level of God revealing himself in history through the story of Exodus. And now we have the exact same thing. God is delivering the church and the people of Israel. He's delivering humanity from the clutches of the enemy. And is he going to destroy his enemy? Yes, just like he did in the times of the Exodus. But he's going to lead his people out to where? To his dwelling place. Do you guys not see the parallels that are going on? And yet, what are we receiving from God? An even greater revelation of who he is. And a revelation about who we are, which is the negative connotation we'll get to. It says that all the nations would worship and acknowledge him because of his righteous acts. I want you guys to understand that in scripture where it does say, that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord, we normally imagine this Jesus coming in super powerful, super angry, and like forcing everyone on their knees saying, I am the Lord. No, it's not going to be like that. You see, when Jesus appears in the sky, the entire world will see it coming. The entire world will experience it. His parousia, or his second coming. When that happens, it doesn't matter what world religion you're a part of, or if you're an atheist. There's going to be that moment when you go, I was wrong and he was right. not because Jesus is forcing himself on anyone, but because of him showing up and revealing himself. It's going to be that moment where humanity can't argue anymore and go, he is God and I was wrong. And they will bow and they will acknowledge he is Lord. Doesn't mean that they want him as Lord. They're just going to acknowledge, okay, well, I thought it was a make-believe story, but it's true. Keep reading verse 5. After this, I looked, and the heavenly temple, the tabernacle of testimony, was open. Stop right there. The reason why this is significant, again, having to do with Exodus. If you guys remember, eventually God tells Moses to build a tabernacle. Okay, build a portable room that I will spend with my people Israel, and they will literally live, around this center. And this center will be my tabernacle, the place where I meet my people. And all of a sudden, fire or smoke would go into the Holy of Holies. And this fire or smoke would show that God was in his dwelling place and that Israel could worship God in that moment. Why is that significant? Because so far in what we've read in Revelation, it's the word temple, 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 temple. But now it says, after I looked in the heavenly temple, the temple's still there. It's the heavenly temple, not the earthly one, the heavenly one. The tabernacle of testimony was open. This is not the temple. This is the tabernacle. Again, alluding to Exodus chapter 15. Here we have the Holy of Holies and what is coming from this place. Out of the temple came the 7 angels with the 7 plagues, dressed in pure bright linen with golden sashes wrapped around their chest. Why? Because they are sent by God. And these holy angels are here to bring the wrath of God. Where do they come from? They come out from the tabernacle of testimony. Why does that matter? Do you remember I told you that history repeats itself? Did you know that from the beginning of time and space, God has been telling this world that this world is going to be redeemed by him? To prove my point, according to Romans and according to Paul, he said, if we don't share the gospel, it doesn't matter, because all of creation is screaming that there is a God who is the creator and who is the redeemer of all humanity. Rocks will sing his praises if we don't. Knowing that, since the beginning of time and space, God has warned humanity over and over and over and over. We are talking thousands of years, right? Yeah, thousands of years. Over and over and over and over and over and over, telling us the gospel story, telling us the redemption. In the Old Testament, it was someone is coming that is going to redeem Israel, that's going to redeem humanity, that's going to redeem and set us free from who? From sin, devil, and his schemes. That was the future when Jesus came and redeemed us through the cross, redeemed us through his blood and his sacrifice. Now we point back to that, and what are we doing? Repeat, 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 repeat. It's a good repeat, and it's a bad repeat. Why? Because time and time again, we have said no. Time and time again, humanity for thousands of years has been told, if you don't want anything to do with God, then what do you expect God to do? God is here to give you love, to give you a relationship, to give you life, true life, to give you freedom, real freedom, to give you the ability to even have the idea of freedom. He is here to give you everything, the abundance of life, love, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Like he's here to give you his Holy Spirit. He's here to have not just a small portion that we call life with you. He wants to have eternity with you. And yet, this has been repeated since the beginning of time and space. And what has humanity done? No, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you. Here's what's beautiful about God and his love and his slow to anger, which is exactly the description he gives Moses back in Exodus. He says, I am the Lord your God, I am slow to anger. Out of the temple came the 7 angels with the 7 plagues, dressed in pure, bright linen, with golden sashes wrapped around their chest. One of the 4 living creatures gave the 7 angels the 7 golden bowls filled with the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. Then the temple, notice this, the temple was filled with smoke. And the question is, why is it filled with, what kind of smoke? It's not the usual smoke that you guys expect. You look at smoke, like in the tabernacle, it was black or fire. This smoke is almost more luminescent. It's brilliant. It's you can, you know that it is God's presence that is now filling this place to stop what? Here's verse 8. Then the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and his power, thus the luminescent part. And no one could enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed. Why is that significant? If the temple is now shut with the glory of God, nobody can go in, nobody can come out. That means it's time. It is now time for the full wrath of God to complete itself. It is now time for God to bring judgment to the earth. But the gospel and the opportunity to choose God is available throughout all of history until right now. As soon as that temple is filled with that smoke and nobody's allowed in, nobody's allowed out, and the glory of God is just protecting the door, going, nope, this is it. What it signifies is that's it. No more opportunity. No more gospel being preached. No more there's hope. No. Now, if you're watching this and you're saying that's not fair, that is not fair. God's wrath is just not fair. Like, there are so many different situations that you would probably say, well, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with that. I don't agree that God should be telling me what to do and what to this, what to that. Please understand, this is an act of love, because he could have said, after Jesus, if you don't choose me, we're done. And he could have just shut it all off. But he waits. He waits and he waits and he waits and he waits and he waits for so long. This is why to Moses he said, I am the God who is slow to anger and abounding in love, which means that even though we've watched this tribulation happen and you're thinking, this is terrible, this is wrong, his love is still available. His redemption is still available. His forgiveness is still available. But there comes a time when he goes, and that, my folks, is the end of the line. I have allowed you so many thousands of years, thousands of opportunities, dozens and dozens and dozens of moments in your life where I have given you the opportunity to have a relationship with me, but I have to close the door. For those of you who argue and say God's wrath is not just, it is. His wrath, the 7 bowls that he's about to pour onto the earth, it's not too much and it's not too little, because he has waited thousands of years patiently on us. But now the time has come and the door is shut. And it will remain shut. I want you to understand this. The door isn't shut yet. The door is open for you now. Please, again, I plead with you and I ask you, if you haven't given your heart and your life to Jesus, do it now. Not because of his anger. If you've been paying attention, what is being repeated in history over and over and over again? It's his story of redemption. And every time he redeems, oh my goodness, it just keeps climbing the ladder of revealing something about God and revealing something about you. But it doesn't make the past disappear. It builds on the past and says again and again and again, I have shown you, I have told you, I have warned you, I have invited you, I have asked you to give your life to me so that we can have a relationship, because I love you and I only have one of you. And I don't want you to be destroyed. I don't want you to be lost. I don't want you to be swept away, as in the days of Noah. So for those of us who have chosen, I give my heart to Jesus. We have nothing to worry about. But for those who haven't, history's still repeating itself. Can you hear it? But hopefully this sound that you hear will be the sound of God's love embracing you and having you walk into his kingdom. Grace and peace be with you. This is the way. You guys have a wonderful Sunday.